Talia would go to town on me.
Well, I mean, if you look, and I don't want to point fingers, but I mean, if you, oh, we're live now, so be careful what you say, guys. Okay.
Watch those fingers.
Yes, watch, exactly. Okay, we're live. Neil Talia, this is exciting for many reasons, not the least of which is we're actually doing this. I'm so glad to see both of you. This is, third time we've tried to do it. Third time lucky. First time we had to cancel Neil in part, you remember, because Talia decided getting married was more important than doing Facebook Live with you and I. I still haven't gotten over that.
I'm sorry. It wasn't nearly as eventful, I'm sure.
That's and then last time we had some technical glitches that we couldn't overcome, so we had to pull the plug then. So, but we're here now. I'm very glad to have both of you. I've been doing that. You guys know I've been doing this a little bit, not every week, but here and there with different constituents and constituents organizations, just to talk about, well, whatever constituents want to talk about, but with a focus on a lot of the things that are going on in the riding. And amidst all of the troubles and horrors and challenges and difficulties that so many people are facing, there are organizations and people out there who are working night and day to make that easier and try to help those people, and you guys are at the forefront of that. So I want to thank you for everything you do, first of all, and thank you for joining us tonight. For those of you who don't know, and I'm sure everybody watching this does, Neil's the Chief Executive Officer of the Daily Bread Food Bank, which is located right here in Etobicoke-Lakeshore, and you've been there for what, 8 years now, Neil?
Coming up on 3 years. 3 years.
Geez, okay, so you've done so much, it seems like 8 years. I know, because you came in after I got elected in 2015. So, and you've got quite a storied history behind that, which some of those things we can talk about. And I know, and people can see looking over your shoulder, that you are also a dog lover, a fellow dog lover, and a lab lover, nonetheless.
Yeah, Charlie is integral to me now. He's just such a lovely little guy.
Yeah, well,
he's not joining us this evening, but one time he'll have to meet Willow.
Well, yeah, well, Walnut usually he usually picks the most inopportune time to come down and jump up and put his paws on my shoulder, so he might join us at some point. And Talia, listen, thanks very much. Seriously, congratulations on getting married. That's very exciting, and very happy for you. And I understand it went very well. Even something like that is difficult during these challenging times. So, but congratulations. You're the Vice President Research and Advocacy at Daily Bread, and look, you both have, I'm not going to read your bios, but I mean, I know you both, but I looked at both of your bios before starting tonight, and it's you are both highly qualified with vast extensive experience, and it's just more remarkable what you're doing when you look at that, because you obviously realize how important this sector is and what needs to be done, and to build on the good work that's been done in the past. So look, I'll stop there, and just maybe I'll turn the floor over to you guys. And we've got a bit of an agenda. We're going to talk about Daily Bread, and you can tell us sort of the how Daily Bread works and food banks generally, perhaps, because I think there's a lot of people out there, and I would include myself in this, not so much now as I was before, perhaps, but people sort of understand the concept of food banks, but they don't understand sort of intake, distribution, the connection between the various different food banks in different parts of the city. So having that information would be very helpful too. And then later on, we'll get to, and I think maybe you'll touch on this in your report or your presentation, but there was a report that came out in the summer, which was what we were supposed to be talking about the first time we tried this. And it was a report talking about food banks in the impact COVID's had in particular. And there's a lot of startling revelations that come out of that. So maybe we can get to that a little bit later too. So I'll stop talking for a second and turn it over to one or both of you guys.
Sure. Well, first of all, James, thank you for inviting both Talia and me. It is, I've enjoyed over the past 3 years getting to know you and your love for the community and the people of Etobicoke South. so I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of, as you mentioned, the way that Daily Bread operates. I will try my best to be brief, and then I'm going to turn things over to Talia. One of the best decisions that I made was extending an opportunity for Talia to join our team. I have been so impressed over the last 2 years with Talia's ability to take the research and what's going on in the community, developing that, and developing mature, thoughtful, deep, and comprehensive social policy recommendations for all levels of government, so that we can do our best to make sure that nobody needs to make use of a food bank. And I count myself very lucky to be able to work every single day with her. So the way that so Daily Bread, this is pre-COVID, and that seems like years ago.
Yeah.
We were seeing in January a 7% increase in the number of people who needed to make use of food banks before the COVID, a year-over-year change. It was working out to about a 7% increase. And I remember having a conversation with the chair of our board about that and saying, listen, things are good economically. The unemployment rates are low. There should be money in individuals' pockets at this time. And yet we're seeing a startling increase, almost 3 times the rate of population growth in the city, of people having to make use of food banks, and expressed a concern that we needed to prepare for something big to happen. At that point, I was concerned about fluctuations in the stock market that were coming about, and none of us had any clue that March 25th was going to happen. And so it happened. And I'll give you a couple sort of year-over-year comparisons. In September of 2019, there were 67,000 client visits to food banks supported by the Daily Bread across the city. In this past September, that number skyrocketed to just under 104,000 client visits in a single month. And so we are concerned. We're concerned about what will happen in the next couple of weeks as individuals affected by the return to phase 2 no longer have that paycheck that they need. And so it's been an incredible upswing. But there's a few hopeful moments that I've had in this, James. I don't think before the pandemic we would have had this Zoom call. I don't think that we would have had the opportunity to speak with our MP and the community as a whole about significant issues. And so that's one thing that has come out. And in fact, the Prime Minister last week asked for a number of food banks from across the country to come together for a Zoom call just to find out how it's going on the ground. And you never would have thought that we would do that 6 months ago. And it was a great opportunity to be able to have a direct conversation and relay what we were seeing. So that's been positive. But there's been a whole lot of things that we've had to work through. For residents in your riding, if they drive by the Daily Bread Food Bank, they'll notice that there's a field hospital tent there, and that was put up by our friend Raul Singh from Global Medic, who said you got to isolate individuals from coming into the building. And so we did that, the weekend that the shutdown happened. When the shutdown happened, many of our food banks actually needed to pause. They were run by volunteers, probably volunteers in a higher risk group, and they said we can't go out. We've got to isolate them at home. And so 30% of our network went down, but almost instantly the community rallied and came together, and pop-up food banks were established. And you might have heard about them in the news, where there were pop-up food banks in libraries throughout the city. So wherever there was a discontinuation of service, we were able to make sure that everyone in the city had access to the food that they need. And then we had challenges, internally in terms of concerns about our drivers going to multiple different locations. And here's where the private sector was fantastic, where AMJ Campbell said, our drivers are not doing nearly as much moving as they were previously. How can we help? And so our drivers would distribute food in the morning, and normally they'd pick up food in the afternoons. And AMJ said, no, we'll take care of the pickups. So you do the deliveries, and that means half the number of stops that a driver would make, and therefore mitigating the risk and reducing the risk to our drivers. And so there was different groups that came together to be able to come over and overcome every single hurdle that was put in our way. And we held out a goal that every single delivery would be made on time and made safely. And I believe that we hit that goal, and I'm very proud of the team who made that happen. It was challenging. We had to reduce the number of volunteers by about 5-6 in the number who were coming to 191 New Toronto. It was hard. We had the number of individuals dropping off food at a fire hall or a grocery store went from £1 million in March of 2019 to about £300,000 in March of 2020. And so creative solutions come up, and I loved having you and Christine Elliott and Kinga Surma and the mayor come out to our drive-through drop-off of food this past Thanksgiving. But I will say for the listeners, and this isn't a shameless endorsement of you because I can't do that. But what I can say is how deeply appreciative I am, James, that you're not there just on Thanksgiving. That throughout the year there have been opportunities to have a conversation, and to visit and to check in on us, and to make sure that the food was going out to the individuals that needed it. When we deliver food to people, just a little bit in terms of how we work, we make sure that there is 3 days worth of food every week provided to an individual, which is basically a low number on the amount of food that they need between what their incomes will support and what they actually need. And so we do that, and we do that in locations all across the city, in over 100 food programs across the city. And we cook meals as well. A lot of the out of the cold programs and community programs, student nutrition programs, those are all made possible because of the food provided by the Daily Bread Food Bank. And we'd never be able to make that happen unless it was for the philanthropic generosity of so many. We are 100% dependent on private donations, although through the pandemic there has been government support of the food bank, and that's new to us, and we're appreciative of that. But really, it's community saying, we know there is a fundamental problem. We know that individuals' right to food is not being realized, and we can do something about it, rallying around together and making sure that the emergency food issues are taken care of. And that brings me to Talia, because the second part of our mission is to advocate for systemic change, to look at what the data is saying, develop social policy, and suggest to all levels of government that they use our data to make concrete decisions that will reflect Canadian values in the most positive way possible. And so I'm going to turn things over to Talia to talk about that second half of the mission. Get the food out and then advocate for the change. And that's what Talia does so effectively. So
excellent. Thanks, Neil.
So I do have some slides. I'm a little worried about sharing them just in case of technology. So I might just go on.
I think
without
we've got
them.
the technology beat this time, so I'm confident it'll work.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll try and share my screen. Let me know how this goes. Here we go.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect.
Yeah, okay. Hold on. There's my thingy. Okay, there we go. All right, so yeah, as Neil mentioned, when March hit, it was really all hands on deck, just trying to get food out the door. Like so many, nonprofits and charities, it was just, we were trying to figure out this new reality. How do we keep people safe? How do we keep fulfilling our mission, constantly evolving with evolving guidance? But at the same time, because research is such a core component of what we do, we knew that this was also a critical time to just stop and take pause and go out and talk to food bank clients and say, what is happening in your life? How are you coping with this really difficult time? How is this impacting your food security? So we did a phone survey with over 200 food bank clients at the height of the first wave of the pandemic. And we found some really interesting things that I'm just going to walk you through here. So as Neil mentioned, food bank visits have gone up quite dramatically since COVID. We've seen a 200% increase in the rate of new clients coming to the food banks. And of the new clients, about 3/4 said they started coming to a food bank specifically because of COVID-19, because of job loss or reduction in hours. And now, as Neil mentioned, we're seeing even higher increases. So this trend, we released our report in July, and since then, even the number of food bank clients have gone up even more, about to about 25,000 visits per week. That means we're also putting more food out the door. We distributed 49% more food than last year to meet that demand. So, you know, it comes with operational challenges, but it's critical to being able to meet that need, that every person that comes to a food bank is going to walk away with that same level of food. And what our research told us was that during the pandemic, the frequency of going a whole day without food increased by about 20% for our respondents. So you can see here, blue is pre-COVID and red is during COVID. So people are missing more meals. They're reducing their food intake as a result of the pandemic. We also saw a big increase to stress and anxiety. It was about 3 times higher, that people were really anxious and stressed almost every day about being able to access enough food. We also found, really interestingly, that food bank clients were at higher risk for exposure to COVID-19. They were more likely to be in industries that were most affected, service industries, trades, manufacturing. And then a lot of food bank clients don't have medical coverage, dental coverage through their work. And so that just kind of is an indicator that the job is a little bit perhaps precarious, or that they don't have those full suite of benefits to rely on, like sick days, for example. We also found, this was a really interesting finding for me, that not only were food bank clients at higher risk to be exposed to COVID-19, but they actually were at higher risk for a severe illness from COVID-19. So when we think of high risk as being people who are 60 and older, who have chronic medical conditions, we had about half food bank clients were considered high risk, and that's compared to about 27% in the population. So definitely overrepresented here. And these quotes just kind of go and show you what does it actually feel like to be going through this pandemic while you're experiencing food insecurity. And you could see just the incredible amount of stress, of worry, the lack of connection with others that comes from that isolation. So these are the things that people were really grappling with. We also know that our federal government made a commitment that no Canadian, should have to choose between their health and putting food on the table. And we saw a number of policy interventions at all levels of government, from the federal, provincial, municipal government. This is just a small list. And that was so critical. I've been working in policy for a while outside of government, and just to see all levels of government come together, collaborate, get policies out the door to really support people, that was, for me, one of the most powerful things that came out of the pandemic. But, my optimism has its limits, and one of the most concerning findings we had was about a potential housing crisis that we might be facing. We saw during COVID, the number of our respondents paying more than half of their income towards rent climbed dramatically, as you can see here, over 80% of clients during COVID were now putting half of their income towards rent. And that's not because their rent has changed, probably, it's because they've had a reduction in income. And when you reach that threshold of 50%, that's when you become at higher risk for homelessness. And at the same time, we see about 1 in 3 respondents are worried that they're not going to be able to pay rent 4 to 6 months from the time of the survey. And that was conducted in about June. So we're getting close to that time period where people are worried that they might be facing eviction. So there's still a lot of work to be done to support people, and we're fortunate in Canada to have all levels of government still working really hard on these issues. But at Daily Bread, what we're working towards is working collaboratively with all levels of government build a new normal, to prioritize income supports, protect affordable housing, and to improve and expand health benefits to really support people so that we know that they can access food, that they can live those healthy, dignified lives, that they have the income they need to meet their basic needs. So that's just a little snapshot of our research. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Perfect. See, it worked. I forgot to mention, yeah, the last time we canceled, because Neil, you bailed because you thought speaking with the Prime Minister was more important than speaking to Talia and I. But
well, it's only because of good people like you that you forgive mistakes that I.
That's right. That's right. Listen, thank you both. There's a lot to unpack there. Look, I'd read through the report before, but that was an excellent summary, Talia. So there's a couple things you both touched on. I mean, Neil, you talked about the 7% increase pre-COVID, but then if you look at that number of the percentage of people, the increase post-COVID, 76% of the people who are now using food banks identify their need as being caused by COVID, which means 24% are using it for non-COVID reasons, that's a staggering number to me. Like what do you attribute all that to? Because you're right, before back in January, things were seemingly humming along well. But one thing this pandemic does is it's exposed all of the vulnerabilities in our society, and that's that. Anyway, I just find that stat staggering. So,
well, they were humming along well in a number of the statistics, but I guess part of the question would be, was it enough to keep up with the expenses of living in the city where incomes keeping pace? There's an expression in our sector that food insecurity is not a food issue, but an income issue. And I believe that to be true. So you had the expenses of the city rising, incomes not rising at the same rate, and a large population who are dependent on programs like disability, where there is a stagnation in terms of the increases of disability payments and the expected income acceleration that you'd expect annually. And it's put people further and further behind. They really haven't caught up since 1995, when there was a 21% decrease in OW payments, and so it's never kept pace. And so it's incredibly challenging. And so, one of the things in our last Who's Hungry report that Talia authored last November showed that the average individual coming to a food bank, after paying for their rent and their utilities, has about $7.83 a day to survive on. And so you can't live in our city on that amount. Talia, I've probably missed a number of important points, though.
No, I think you covered it. I think that the number in our report is that of our new clients, 3/4 are because of COVID. But for our existing clients, the majority of them are either on social assistance or they have they're facing barriers to employment. So a lot of our clients are looking for employment, but the majority are facing barriers because of illness or disability, lack of credentials, challenges with language and cultural barriers. Right. So we see that there's a lot of clients who are coming to food banks over the long term. They're just really struggling to kind of plant their feet and make that step out of poverty. So it's definitely one of those cyclical things that once you're sort of in poverty, it becomes really difficult to move out of poverty.
Yeah, I mean, so this report, I mean, the recommendations you've made, that this isn't just a pandemic issue. I mean, it's an economic crisis, it's a health crisis, but it's a housing crisis. I mean, and you've probably heard me say this before, Neil, but like I moved to Etobicoke when I was 11 years old, which was a long time ago. And you pick any home in this community in any part of the riding, and that house is worth 20 times, it costs 20 times more to buy that house now than it did then. But the people living in them are not making 20 times more money. So there's this gap that keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and people are getting squeezed in the middle, but they're getting squeezed in the bottom. And that's what you're talking about, because incomes and programs haven't sort of kept pace with all of these other costs. And so these are the people you're talking about being exposed. And this is why this report's so important, because like, I'll say it again, this pandemic is, I mean, there's a lot of things governments knew about, people knew about, different organizations knew about, but people weren't giving them the attention that they were due because they didn't need to. Now, I think, if there's good that's going to come out of all of this, is that because all of this has been exposed, and you've got the data, and data matters.
Well, and not to interrupt, but so does lived experience, and we've all gone through this experience together. Some of us had a better experience through being able to keep their employment and things like that. But that experience, that shared experience, I think is important. When I lived in New York City for a few years, and the mission that I was working on there was with Habitat for Humanity, building decent, affordable housing. And we spent as much time in that city, not just building housing, but preserving housing. And so as we think about those homes in Etobicoke and the skyrocketing valuations that they have, and that's good for the homeowners that are there, we need to make sure that we preserve the rental market, to make sure that there is access to decent accommodation throughout the city, and sometimes that can be very difficult.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you're right. I mean, your report refers to the National Housing Strategy, which we've been. Adam, I remember Neil, Adam, and I came down and we did a question and answer presentation at Daily Bread. That was 2 or 3 years ago now, sort of lost track, but on that very issue, because I mean, the need for housing supports at all levels. It's housing affordability, but then affordable housing too, and Toronto keeps growing, keeps getting more expensive, and all of these things. And you talk about working with the different levels of government, which is another positive thing which has emerged out of this as well, because events of today may prove me wrong, but for the most part, political parties have put their swords down and tried to work together to find solutions to all of these problems. And the Prime Minister and Chrystia Freeland are working with Doug Ford, and Doug Ford's working with John Tory, and vice versa. I talk to the mayor's office almost weekly, and we're working together to try to, and we're talking about these exact same issues that we're talking about tonight: housing, food, and healthcare. And healthcare. Let's talk about that for a second. This is referred to in your report too. The mental health consequences of this pandemic, and all of the things we're talking about are pretty significant too. And I tell you, I think that's covered in the report as well. Maybe you could sort of chat a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing increasingly more and more kind of evidence coming out from the mental health sector that the pandemic is going to have a huge kind of hidden cost on mental health. And we're already starting to see kind of the edges of that coming out. And I think it's going to be a really long tail on the mental health front, because we know that isolation, humans aren't meant to be isolated. We're social beings. We need connection. And for food bank clients, our meal programs, for example, that we support, were a place where people would go and sit down and have a meal. And that's a hugely important time of connection. But because of the pandemic, a lot of meal programs moved to a takeout model, which, was important because it means people still got food, but then you miss out on that social connection. And that's one of the things that's I think going to be hardest moving forward, is that we have to balance kind of the safety of individuals and infection prevention, while also realizing that there's other costs, that we have to kind of balance the two and find ways to make that connection, particularly since, not all people can have the computer literacy or the access to computer to kind of get on a Zoom call with loved ones. So people can be really isolated. One of the other things we did was we realized, some people aren't going to be able to leave their homes at all because of the pandemic. They might be really high risk. And how are they going to get food if they can't afford, a grocery delivery? They don't have a family member that can go and pick up food for them. So I mean, this isn't so much on the mental health front, but just on the isolation, we partnered with Red Cross to do a home delivery program.
Okay.
So making sure that people in their homes, even if they are isolated, we're still able to access that food.
And that program continues, where individuals can call 211. They go through a screening process, and if they're eligible in terms of the criteria, 7 days worth of shelf-stable food will be delivered to their door.
That's fantastic.
There have been tens of thousands of deliveries now made through that program. It's needed. I worry very much about sort of floodgates of even more down the road, because it's a continuous thing. This is not going away anytime soon.
No. Well, as you've alluded to, we're back in phase 2 here in Toronto, stage 2 here in Toronto, and in Peel and Ottawa. Look at what's going on in Europe right now. I mean, Europe is country by country, they're shutting down again. I saw something today that Canadians are no longer welcome to travel to Europe in the short term. So this problem it's not going away. People need to realize that. But this may be, I think I know the answer to this question, but I didn't know the extent of the home delivery. That's fantastic. I know that I was with you both on Thanksgiving weekend, and what we saw there was, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, Daily Bread did a food drive leading up to Thanksgiving weekend. Ordinarily, and I've been there in the past, you would collect all your donations and people come in and sort it on Thanksgiving weekend and put it together. But because of the current situation, you can expand on it, but it was a drive-through drop-off. And I came down there Saturday morning, and I have to be honest with you, I didn't expect to see what I witnessed. I was overwhelmed. Like, there was lineups of cars for hours. And one of the things I've seen through this pandemic, which has been truly amazing, inspiring, is a number of people who reach out saying, how can I help? Like, I've got time, or I've got, resources. What can I do? And you witnessed that on Saturday, because, I thought, okay, this is just the initial, rush here. There's going to be several cars for half an hour, but it went on for hours, and it was really something to see. And you guys were so well organized. You're machines. I mean, it was just boom. It was seamless. Which leads me to the question. We had a question online: is, do you have enough food? Are you getting enough food to satisfy the demand?
That's a great question. The answer is no. For public donations, we are not getting the same number of donations from the public that we need. And so we are very hopeful that people would drop off food at any fire hall or grocery store. However, again, sort of a hopeful, uplifting aspect of the pandemic, individuals have been generous from a financial perspective, and governments have come to our aid. And so there has been funding provided to us so that we could increase our food purchasing. In June, I submitted the annual budget to the board of directors for approval, and it had a large amount of money set aside for food purchasing, which was double the amount that we set aside the year before. And then this past September, the board authorized another doubling of that food fund. So it has been difficult, but it's been made more, it's been made slightly easier by individuals making a monetary contribution. But we do like the food donations in that, when you were there at Thanksgiving, I don't know, the thing that I loved the most was that it generally was individuals, often with kids in the back of the car, and they would come around through this circle, and
or in a wagon.
Yeah, there was somebody with a wagon and two toddlers and some donations. And it was lovely that we had the Argonauts, we had elected officials remove the food from the car, so it was done very safely. But it was a wonderful, I think, life lesson for the kids in the back to talk about, one of the greatest challenges that not only Canada faces, but the world faces, in the growing disparity between those who have and those who don't, and how we can make a difference now and also in the longer term through the changes that we make. And so I'm hopeful that when we build back better, And that means that we look to programs that maybe we never thought were possible. Maybe there's a Tommy Douglas moment where we say, you know, it's not just a healthcare program that we need across the country, but maybe we should be talking about, you know, a full pharmacare program across the country, or that we make sure and guarantee the right to housing. And so I think that there can be another kind of breakthrough moment, because there is the will and the desire for people to make sure that nobody gets left behind.
Yeah, and look, these are the kind of discussions we're having at the federal level, and I know they're having it at the other two levels as well. But because of all of the vulnerabilities been exposed, I mean, we're talking about, you know, like our income support system was entirely inadequate. I mean, that became apparent within days, if not hours, for God's sakes. I mean, you know, that's where the CERB came from and all these other programs, because we, you know, the nature of employment, the type of employment has changed completely from the time these programs were created initially. And so we're now trying to rethink that, and we've made some changes. But it's an ongoing discussion. So this, you know, your input is critical to that. Somebody else just came on and said, "Can you do the drive-through again? Have you contemplated doing that, or is that a one-off?"
No, it's not going to be a one-off.
Okay.
I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but we've reached out to Rogers, who is a great partner, and nobody's using the Sky or the Rogers Center anymore right now. So we have said, listen, at the holiday time, can we have a drive-through around the field of the Rogers Center? And
great idea.
Because we want to be indoors. And we just thought that'd be kind of novel for anybody to drive around second base. So why not do it there? So I hope that the folks that I spoke to at Rogers are on this call right now and hearing some gentle nudging and pressure. We're going to make it happen again at the holiday time, because and you know, Talia mentioned that we're social people. We want it. We miss the public food sorts. We miss the massive number of people engaged with the mission who want to come out to 191 New Toronto Street. And while that can't happen, we're hopeful that they do pick up a pen and write to elected officials of all parties, of all levels of government, and just say, we're with you as you think creatively for those systemic solutions.
Well, that's a great idea, because you know, we need to know that people are supporting this, because, as you know, I mean, negative voices are louder and more frequently heard than those who are supporting you. So it's important in times like this to make sure that people who are with you let you know that. I think that's a great idea about the Rogers Center, by the way. You're right. I mean, that would motivate people to come.
Yeah.
Like I was struck by the number of, and you set this up in all the communities around Daily Bread. You know, the one guy who showed up from 6th Street and he opened his truck. I went, oh, like there was just bags and bags and bags. He said, yeah, this is all from 6th Street. And it was, he'd gone around his whole street and collected this. Like the whole street got together and did this. And it was incredible.
Yeah, what we did there, we called them community champions, where, and anybody listening, they just contact our office. We'll give them the brown paper bags and a route, and they just walk down the street and say, you know, I'll pick it up, leave it out on your porch, and I'll come pick it up on Wednesday or whatever the day is. And then they were packing the cars, not just from all across the city. People were coming there, and so we'll try to make it easier by being a little more central. But you know, if you can think of an area where we can do that through the winter months, we're all in. We want to make it happen again.
Well, hopefully we'll be a mild winter, but I mean, yeah. And my friends Bessie and Steve Weaver, they did it in their community too. Like there's a number of neighborhood champions who, you know, kudos to them for stepping up like that. But the best one was, just so for people listening, this guy came by, he was only a couple blocks away, and he brought his 2 kids on a little wagon. He pulled them in with their donations. It was a special moment of the day, and a day that was a giant special moment itself. That was the
right. And he waited in line. What I loved about it was there were like 20 cars ahead, and he waited, and he was just one of the cars through a drive-through a Wendy's type of thing, and he waited as it went around. It was lovely.
Something to do. Kids need activities these days.
Yeah.
But which is another good point, Talia, because you go back to the pre-COVID days, Neil, and I've been there many times before I was in office. You'd come in on Thanksgiving and Easter, and you do these sorts. It's a great team building thing, but it's also a great family thing.
Yeah.
And people bring their teenage kids or younger kids there, and it's a great life lesson for the kids. And almost without exception, they all come out of there going, geez, that was really good. That was really important. I want to do that again.
Yeah. And we also have, sorry.
No, go ahead.
We used to have a lot of school groups come
Yeah.
as well. And unfortunately, that's something that can't happen right now. But we also saw, when schools were shut down in the spring, there was a gap because a lot of students do rely on student nutrition programs at their schools. And so one of the findings of our report was that parents were really struggling because all of a sudden their kids are at home and they need to feed them. There's more mouths to feed throughout the day. So that was also one of the big kind of challenges we were facing, was all of a sudden, kids need those extra meals. So that was one of the contributors to increasing food bank use as well. But I agree that, it's so important for people of all ages to feel that sense of community and that sense of connection and supporting others. And we've seen some fun and creative things. Like we've seen, one of our staff at Daily Bread, her kids, like they became the community champions. Like they were the ones going door to door. There's a lot of creativity that happens. So I think that's one of the positive things, is that you have to kind of be creative and find your way to kind of make a difference right now.
Well, if you make anything fun, it makes it easier to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you guys have been amazing at that. So look, there's a lot of takeaway. We're not done, but there's a lot of takeaways. And I'm going to ask you now. I'm going to ask you again at the end. But so people out there who want to, other than donating food and donating money, what can people do to help? Because the other thing you said that struck me is you had to cut back your volunteer force by 5-6. That's a startling number too. So how do you make all this happen with so you have twice the demand, 1/6 the number of bodies to do it? How do you make all that work, and how can people help you make that work?
Well, I'll just say it hasn't been easy, but we have a fantastic vice president of operations, Sandra Nesbitt, who has made it happen. So some of, again, mild positives out of this. The volunteers that we have now coming in are sort of regular volunteers. They come in, 5 days a week. They're often individuals who have been laid off their position, and they're keenly interested in advancing very quickly the flow through of a product that we need. So that's been helpful, where we're not training people every single day. So we're a little more efficient than previous. It's been an all hands on deck activity. In the early days of April, Talia was not so much doing research as she was doing, pump truck and skid placements. And
I bought my first pair of steel-toed boots. Big day for me.
and so it was all hands on deck. And now when we purchase food, it does become a little bit easier in that now we have a skid of canned vegetables. And so we don't have to sort. So you miss that stage, and now it becomes just a picking routine. So if you know that the full skid is already sorted for you, we're a little bit more efficient on that front when we purchase the food ourselves with the donations we receive. So again, it hasn't been straightforward, but I've been very, very proud to be able to work alongside some creative people that have always made sure it got done.
Okay. Well, listen, you have another thing that impresses me every time I come down there is you have an amazing team.
Yeah.
Top to bottom. Like you really do. And they're just such nice, genuine people too. You wouldn't be there if you weren't, I suppose. It's stating the obvious, but it really is an inspirational place. So now, in terms of money, there has been these federal programs, including the one that the Prime Minister announced just before the Thanksgiving weekend. Tell me, give us an idea what that money was used for and how it benefited Daily Bread, because there's been sort of three different stages of it.
Sure. So the federal government announced on the Friday before Thanksgiving a $100 million contribution to food programs across the country. What that meant for Food Banks Canada was about $50 million was coming to them to be able to distribute to local food banks. So then it comes to the Toronto area. So what did it mean for Toronto? It meant about $2.3 million came to the Toronto area. And that money came in. So there's been two of these grants. That money came in and it was distributed almost immediately to the food banks that we serve across the city. So you picture a small food bank, I don't know, St. Luke's over on Parkside that needed some refrigeration. And so there was capacity building grants provided to them. That was a portion of it. The other portion was for them to purchase food themselves, so that they could purchase food that was perhaps ethnically appropriate, culturally appropriate, meeting dietary restrictions, those types of things. The funds were used, within weeks. What had been hoped for that it would be months is weeks now.
Yeah.
The province also contributed. As you know, I was pleased to see you at the opening of what we affectionately called Daily Bread 2, which was just down the street, where in one of the movie studios that had been vacant because of the shutdown. Yeah. And the province in that circumstance provided through Feed Ontario 60,000 hampers. So 60,000 7-day hampers were provided in that facility, and it was 50,000 square feet, and it was wall to wall. We have some great drone shots of these hampers. It was just packed, and we thought it would last us a month. At that time, we were serving 65,000 or so per client visits a month. It was gone in 2.5 weeks. It was distributed out, and so that facility is no longer there. And so Thanksgiving, I did put a bug in the ear of Christine Elliott and Kinga Surma to say, we enjoyed that opportunity to be able to serve the community through that provincial program. We would love if it was repeated again. And so maybe not necessarily as hampers, but allowing us to purchase food with that. It really has been great. And the city, so all levels of government have provided support. The city is the one that's administered the 211 program for the home delivery. The city is the one who connected us with the landlord at Daily Bread 2. So there's been coordination, and yeah, I can proudly say that regardless of political stripe, regardless of level of government, I am pleased, as you said, that the swords have been put away, because we're all in this together, and it really, I'm inspired by the civility that has happened, and just the putting the ultimate goal forward of the people first.
No, I remember that day at the movie studio and the premier was there, and the mayor was there, and Councillor Grime was there, and Christine was there, of course. And I remember saying, I said, none of us ever want to go and cut the ribbon and opening of a new food bank, but thank God you're here to do it.
I say Christine Elliott, and I really hope that Christine Horgath Garth is not watching this at all. So if she is, Christine, I'm very sorry.
I didn't. Yeah, I missed that myself too. But
Christine, she would have told. I'm sure she's going to text me, and like I'm going to turn on. There's going to be 5 texts saying, "You said Christine Elliott, you dummy."
Well, Christine and I get along well, and there's a reason for that most people don't know. I don't know if I've shared this with you two, but I said I moved here when I was a kid. I moved here from Thunder Bay. Well, she moved here, moved to Southern Ontario from Thunder Bay.
Oh,
yeah. And I grew up on High Street in Thunder Bay, and she grew up on High Street in Thunder Bay. We lived about a block apart, but just at different times. So, and now here we are, both representing Etobicoke-Lakeshore. Yeah, no, it's very, very strange. So we get along genetically, I suppose, perhaps, I don't know. But no, and it's tremendous, and the as you say, all three levels of government are working together. But there's a lot more work to do, because we're this wasn't a 6-month event. It could be a well, I don't even want to put a time frame on it, because I'm going to be wrong if I try to.
But here's a time frame I'll put on for you, James. And I'm sorry, but
No.
2008-9, it took us a decade to sort of recover from that, and I'm not sure we really did in terms of the numbers that we were serving. And so we're deeply concerned about. The immediate response has been fantastic. It's just that longer term, and as we build back, just making sure that we're looking at it for the long game.
Yeah, and can I just add, what Neil was mentioning, from all levels of government, coming to the support of food security organizations, including food banks, that was so critical to meeting that immediate need. But what was equally, if not even more critical, was those income supports, CERB, and then now the replacement programs for CERB, that kept people out of food banks. That meant that people didn't have to come to food banks, and we still saw an increase in use, and that's because Toronto was such an expensive city. But food banks elsewhere actually saw decreases, where the cost of living isn't so high, where CERB actually went a little bit further for them. So those income support programs had a huge impact. And as Neil said, moving forward, we're going to need some support. Canadians are going to need investments in income supports and affordable housing. That's how we're going to have that long-term kind of recovery. So that's kind of where we have our sights set, is, okay, what's the world going to look like in 5 years from now? Like, are we still going to be seeing the same number of clients, or how can we reduce kind of the line at the food bank? How can we reduce the number of people that have to come to these programs?
Well, that's where we're at as Canadians. We have to, okay, where are we going to be 6 months from now? Where are we going to be 6 years from now? And where are we going to be a generation from now? And this is a time it's forced us to pause and rethink a lot of things. And so when you talk about like the three items you've identified in your report under the recommendation section are exactly the things that are being talked about, but we can't talk about them and not take serious action. So I'm asking everybody how we can help you. I'm asking you to help us too, and that's keep reminding us at every chance you get, when you get an audience with the Prime Minister like that, or the Premier, or Christine Hogarth, or I, or Mark Grimes, or the Mayor. Just keep reinforcing this, because it's got to be done. There's one thing my job does is that it gives you an insight into the world that you don't otherwise have. I've lived in this community for 40 some years now, and I learn new things every day about different neighborhoods and things that are going on. And it gives you a real appreciation for what needs to be done out there. So, and because of the pandemic, other people are sort of seeing beyond their own narrow. I'm trying to say this in a way that doesn't sound negative, but people live their lives and they do their thing, and this has caused them to see how other people live beyond what their daily routine usually consists of. And because of that, I think our opportunity is going to be seized upon to make changes. So just keep banging away, please. Keep doing what you're doing.
All the invitation I need.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Knocking at your door.
Well, look, and you
and
can
all
call
of your colleagues.
you can call me anytime you want. I mean, Neil, you've heard me say it 100 times. You're the only business I want to shut down, but not right now. I need you. We need you guys going strong, and we need to continue helping me every way we can. So just thank you. But look, if I can do anything to help encourage other people to be more aware, or to source, money or food or volunteers or things you need, just let me know, and we can do more of this and put it out there, because what you're doing is I don't have words to stress how important it is, what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you, James.
Yeah, listen, I'm glad we finally got to do this. We had to let Talia get married and have her honeymoon. We had to let you talk to the Prime Minister, and we solved all the technical problems. But I don't know what you two think, but I think it was well worth it. So keep up the good work. All right.
Thanks so much for having us.
All right. My pleasure.